Hello everyone, welcome back to PASSTHEauxCORD, and welcome to the final year-end list for 2025, that being the top 20 best albums of the year. Even though this is the most positive list of the whole bunch, I'm excited to get done with this one and finally leave this strange, insane, and mostly terrible year behind us, no matter how 2026 may be looking so far. The music really was the only thing out here saving us, so let's talk about the best of the best when it comes to albums this year and really give them their flowers they deserve. One important caveat before we do that, if an artist was already featured on my top 20 best songs of the year, they will not be included here to avoid redundancy. If it seems like something very obvious is missing, there's a good chance it was already on that list. The other majorly noticeable absences would come in the form of projects classified as mixtapes instead of albums. Normally I do lump the two together onto the same list, but I've never really known if I should or I shouldn't for sure. There will be timestamps below me if you're not so much interested in this particular section, but this year, since there's less space on the main list, I thought we'd go ahead and do a top 5 mixtapes before the album. So let's get straight into it with number 5. Well, it's really been true for the entire 2020s decade to this point. It felt like in 2025, the rage subgenre has never been so flourishing and populated. Among the recent entries to the scene, Lucy Bedrock is one of them, only having released one album before this mixtape and already having amassed quite a large following. Through loud distortion, catchy but obscured vocals, interesting production, and wild experimentation, they proved with Unmusique that the fan base they have amassed is well deserved. I think once you get used to the chaos and loudness this project has to offer, it does begin washing together a bit or becoming one note, but if you're into it, I don't think you'll end up minding that. One way or the other, Lucy's style is definitely shaking things up a bit, and I can only see them continuing to improve and impress further from here with better projects and even cooler rage music in the future. This is a great first entry for me, second entry overall in the discography from what I understand. Moving on to number 4. Yeah, this one's a mixtape. Weird, right? What's possibly weirder is that it's Pink Pantheress' biggest and most popular release yet, really putting her on the map in a big way this year, in a way that she always had potential to do. It is only 20 minutes, so that's likely the reason for the non-album classification, but regardless, so much sweet and unique dance pop fun is packed into that 20 minutes. The song Illegal was naturally the biggest song on here, and I find it really interesting how, despite it being potentially overplayed and very prominent in short form content, it never really seemed to get on people's nerves. I guess that goes to show that Pink Pantheress just really has a knack for quirky, catchy music that's widely lovable. Personally, I think the best track by far is Stateside, which was notably produced by The Dare. Are we finally willing to admit The Dare is great yet? Regardless of what ends up being your favorite though, there's only 8 real songs here, so it'll be pretty easy to pick a favorite, and I think there's probably one for everybody. Moving on to number 3. Desofusiony is someone who sent me his music when he started making it earlier this year. Out the gate, I liked it a lot, and ever since he's become massively prolific, with most projects outdoing or matching the one that came before it. Across 4 full mixtapes and 2 EPs, it's really hard to even pick which one gets a shout out on any of these lists, because in a way they all deserve it. Pretty wild considering the quantity. The style of music across these projects is very interesting because in essence, at the core, Desofusiony's music is experimental hip-hop, but it's also many other things. There are aspects of sound collage in the music, many types of ambient music at play. Time and time again, I've called it dreamlike, and I mean that in the most direct ways possible, not really just an abstract way. But of his projects so far, The Cloud in the Dead Skies is my favorite, and it's likely because it leans the heaviest yet into that strange, almost eerie and surreal place. There's even a full album movie, a music video that runs the whole thing of sorts, full of strange experimental visuals that's absolutely worth watching while listening to this and really getting a unique experience from it. Already having put out a great single again this year, it doesn't seem like this train is coming to a halt. I really recommend hopping on and giving Desofusiony a try. Moving on to number 2.
Y'all be in DMs begging these hoes I feed off the dollar menu. Yeah, started off broke, now I got that money on Blicky, I got it.
In the East Coast versus West Coast hip-hop feud this year, Joey Badass might have won the battle, but TDE's latest rising star, Ray Vaughn, absolutely won the war. While this is his second mixtape, it feels like his debut moment and reminds me in the progression of something like Kendrick's Section 80, where he's impressing right out the gate at the first time that most people are hearing him. Kendrick comparisons don't have to end there though, as this is pretty similar to Good Kid, Mad City in a way. There's a conceptual flow including spoken, acted skits. There are similar or at least adjacent lyrical themes. There's also a big duality between big, accessible, fun bangers and deep, somber, introspective songs, often with a little in between and both ends being extremely effective. But even if you draw those parallels, Ray Vaughn is very much his own personal, unique rapper and shows a ton of individual character and personality on this mixtape. He's very technically proficient, has great flows, has solid lyricism, but he's also quite relatable and comes across pretty real and genuine in this album's heaviest and most emotional moments. This one's a bit of a journey in its listening experience, and across it you'll almost certainly find a lot to love if you're at all into West Coast hip-hop. Great stuff, can't wait to see where he goes from here, and I should probably specify that this easily would have been in the top 10 if not top 5 albums of the year if I lumped the groups together. And finally, moving on to number 1. And we're now here at the number 1 pick, and there's no other mixtape it really could have been than the debut from Ghost Mountain. I want to make it clear out the gate that when I had my albums and mixtapes all on one list, this was number 2 overall, so very high up on my favorite things I heard this year, quite obviously. As someone who's been following Haunted Mountain since nearly their inception and saw Ghost Mountain leave and seemingly retire from music back in 2021, it's always been a big what if ever since. Cemetery as their main member and the rest of the Haunted Mound have had their ups and downs with many positive moments, but it's always felt slightly like a piece was missing since Ghost Mountain left. He was always such a great addition to Cemetery's style of rapping, coming through with something more melodic, emotional, and extremely rich in imagery and poetic proficiency, but we never got to see it in full effect on a full-length project. In 2025 though, against all odds, we finally got to see that potential come to full fruition, and not only did it somehow meet expectations, it up and past them entirely. The music on October Country falls in line with the cloud rap and witch house aesthetics of Haunted Mound, as well as the horror-based lyrical imagery rooted in mentions of folklore, cryptids, and the like, but is also so much more and feels separate from it by being a project that sounds so warm, nostalgic, emotional, and bittersweet. It fits its title because it is in a way a trip to the countryside in fall months. Just you, the stars, and your deepest memories. It's sometimes surreal to think about the fact that this project exists at all, despite having listened to it numerous times, and somehow every one of the many times I've come back to it, it still impresses me in a way. This mixtape is beautiful, everything I could have asked for, and is absolutely the mixtape of the year. Now we'll move on to the album, starting with number 20.
Move it up, it's a breach.
It really heals my inner younger self a bit to be able to put a 21 Pilots album in the best albums of 2025 lists. It seemed like that ship had sailed a while ago, but not the case. I was a big fan as far back as the Blurry Face era, and then just felt even more strong about that in the years that Trench came around, an album that I still like very much to this day, and easily their best album to that point. But really by the time Scaled and Icy came out around 2021, I couldn't find much love for them anymore, whether it just be because I grew out of it a bit, or if Scaled and Icy was honestly bad enough to just kill the whole thing for me. But last year's Clancy did show some peak highlights for the band, and showed a lot of potential, but now they've never been so back as they are with Breach. For starters, this is the grand finale to the narrative they've been weaving for over a decade now, focused around the Clancy protagonist that was the namesake of the previous album. There's a lot more to gather from it, no matter how deep you want to go into the lore. And I think it came to a pretty stellar conclusion, wrapping things up great narratively and sonically. But important beyond that, this is really just peak pop rock to a degree you don't see so much of in the mainstream anymore. anymore and really hardly see at all. The instrumentals and production are bold, well assembled, the choruses are ridiculously catchy, even Tyler's rapping is the best it's ever been. Highlights like Drum Show, Center Mass, and The Contract are easily among the best 21 Pilots songs in general, and I think this is their best work to date. It makes me so happy to say that, and I hope it's only farther up from here even yet from them in the future. Moving on to number 19. Skin Theory is a band I heard of a little while back in 2024 with their second ever single, June, which impressed me quite a bit, and they've more or less been working on this album since. The result panned out here in Briar, and I think the fruits of their labor paid off intensely. The band wears their biggest influences of the windmill scene bands, especially Black Midi, on their sleeves boldly, but I don't think it's to the point of sounding derivative, especially on this album's most ambitious moments. For example, the track Tubes, with its uneasy, tense build-up to something entirely abstract I can't really compare to much of anything I've heard before. That being the lengthy, sprawling, uncontrolled instrumental centerpiece that's bizarre as hell but always strikes me as interesting more and more. And regardless of comparison's sake, tracks such as the closing title track hit me as undeniably, radiantly beautiful in a totally unexpected way. There are even lyrical narratives, or at least strong themes, that make this album even farther yet into the unique and grandiose statement that it is. I think they can go up from here, possibly setting themselves apart even more, or make something a bit more cohesive yet, but regardless, this is a ridiculously impressive debut. Even if styles like this are becoming a bit tired in the recent handful of months, there's still exciting stuff to be seen. Skin Theory is absolutely an example of it. Moving on to number 18. Skrillex's ever so elegantly titled most recent album came as a total shock and surprise, and also manages to balance nostalgia with what's legitimately the best music he's made. It keeps the bro step and dubstep style Skrillex has used so effectively since most of our childhoods that's remembered fondly, takes things up a notch in a huge way in chaos and in ambition. While this is all under the umbrella of electronic music, this thing hops from style to style, genre to genre in a blink of an eye, never leaving you knowing what quite to expect next. It's also broken up by numerous features, reaching as far as even including the likes of Dylan Brady or White Armor, most of which giving great additions. DJ Smokey is another name you might be familiar with, and if not by name, then probably by voice, being the narration on some classic mixtapes, here delivering some funny but ultimately meaningful lines. For example, this humorously placed line on the track Biggie Bap.
This beat drop has been seized by Atlantic Records and has been replaced with silence.
The album feels even more like a middle finger to his label when considering how it's structured, giving numerous tracks around only 1 minute, most of them flowing together and very few meant to stand separated from the album itself. You pretty much have to listen to the whole album at once. If you were to separate any song, it'd be the closer, Voltage, which just so happens to be an infamous piece of semi-lost media up until this album's release. Take that into account next to something like a track called Skrillex is Dead, and I have to wonder if this is where Sonny Moore retires the alias and moves on. Regardless of what this album means in the grander scope of Skrillex's discography, it's insane, it sounds great, and it's absolutely worth a listen. Moving on to number 17.
Give it to me. Give it to me.
Oh my god! First things first, man, fuck your ego. Heartbeats not.
Coming up and making it big in 2024 with some classic BC Boys inspired revivalism and fun catchy bangers, JVB are already coming back at us with the next step in their evolution. On Hyper Youth, the duo effectively brought forward their fun-loving attitude, early internet age revivalism, and hard-hitting production, but added more twists that set them apart. While No Hands played it pretty straight to their influences, they go so far on here as to do some Plunderphonics type sample work and work in some more experimental or hyperpop adjacent recent styles. The features on here are all great, with Rebecca Black and JPEG Mafia's inclusions being the ones that I'd say go the best for representing what I was just saying with the album's experimentation and new direction. And while most of the songs are pretty party-ready hype bangers, multiple are also more meaningful songs that take a more serious and heartfelt approach. In a way, there's something clashing about this dichotomy, but in many more ways, it's very cool to see the duo expressing themselves farther, and this album has a ton of fun and interesting ideas to do it with. Next, with number 16.
Cause you're not the only one in my head.
Despite it only being a side project, I've found myself more into this not-for-radio project than I ever have been with the Marias. Maybe the Marias just isn't for me, maybe I need to re-listen. Regardless, Melt really puts the dream in dream pop in ways I couldn't have expected, but immediately enjoyed. It's subtle, soft-spoken, but as remarkable as it is understated, often finding beauty in simplicity or quieter tones. It takes the title Melt very well to heart too. It's a project that feels like sinking into a viscous liquid. It's sort of a flowing, immersive expression of emotion that strikes with each revisit I've had so far. Some great instrumental work here also should not go underappreciated, as I truly think it is the icing on the cake. The bass usage is especially fantastic when it pops up. Might technically be the best album we talk about here all day when it comes to lyrics. We're talking deeply emotional moments, pure poetry, fantastic imagery, and really the perfect companion to the album's dreamy, peaceful atmosphere. This one's sweet, pretty, and really an all-around nice experience. Some tracks outshine others easily, but there is nothing bad or even mediocre here, as is the case with number 15. We love a good promising debut here, and for the second of the day, it's rapper John Mitchell and producer Anthony James for their collaborative and joint debut album, Ego Trip. On the rapping end, we hear someone who's clearly a fresh voice in hip-hop, but also sounds remarkably skilled for someone on their first endeavor. John Mitchell's rapping is incredibly passionate, he has a very unique voice, and he manages some catchy melodies and memorable bars all throughout. There's a reference to Tyler the Creator at one point, so we can only assume that's one point of influence at play. While he certainly sets himself apart massively, you can see that influence at play in the best ways all throughout the album. On the production end, Anthony James having a bright future would be the understatement of the century. He's making soulful, powerful rap beats effective as some of the best to ever do it. The mixing and general sound quality is at times a bit crunchy and lo-fi, but it really feels like an intentional aesthetic choice to me. One that could have gone poorly, but honestly turned out great. I love that this album feels a little more analog. Even though I believe it's only ever been available digitally, there's something about that warm grit that makes Ego Trip feel even more special. But what's really important is that it has memorable songs, powerful moments, and acts as a wildly impressive and promising work from two incredibly skilled and talented individuals. Next up with number 14. I've said this before, and I will stand on the opinion that each of the three Boy Genius members are fantastic artists in their own right, even if very similar ones, but they're much better solo than they are with collaborators, including each other. With solo Phoebe being MIA for the last 5 years and Julian's latest being a heavily collaborative country album, this album is all we've really gotten in a while as far as that goes. Thankfully, it is more than enough. When it comes to singer-songwriter music, what Lucy Dacus creates doesn't break any rules, any molds, but she's just so good at what she does that it's hard not to appreciate it regardless. The instrumentals on Forever Is a Feeling are well crafted, nicely structured, and solidly produced to a particularly great level that lulls you into the very emotional themes of the album. And emotionally strong the album absolutely is, which goes to be expected for this type of music, but is rarely seen as well done as Lucy Dacus tends to do it. I could sit here all day and read off lyrics that I love, but honestly, I might as well just screenshot the first several lines of my written review and leave it at that. There's also even a really great Hozier feature on here on the track Bullseye, which I found unexpected, but it worked pretty well. All around, it's a simpler one, but absolutely finds so much beauty in that simplicity. This one's underrated as hell, go give it a try if you're into indie singer-songwriter type stuff for sure. In the realm of promising debuts, we have yet another with Chilean post-rock band PASSTHEauxCORD. This is one of the most promising debuts I've seen in some time in general as well, and it's pretty mind-blowing how this band has such a great grasp on this style. Comparisons could be drawn and already have been drawn to Black Country New Road or other similar artists, but at the same time this is really its own beast entirely. And a frightening beast it is. This album remarkably takes a heaviness and intensity to this style of music I haven't seen or heard before. Through intimidating build-ups and mind-blowing payoffs, PASSTHEauxCORD have something uniquely dark, visceral, and powerful within their sound. Despite its mere 8 tracks, this is a very long album, clocking in at 78 minutes, but it makes great use of that time. I'm consistently surprised at how much they manage to up the ante as the album carries on. Just when it feels like you've touched the gritty depths with this one, it pulls stronger. There's a language barrier here, so my apologies if it does fail to connect with me as much as it might some on a deeper level, but I do still think that this is a fascinating and interesting album lyrically when everything is translated. Whether or not you speak the language, there's probably some more to unpack there and make the album even more interesting yet, but all around I'm just so impressed at how well this album pulls off the sound it is going for. Now moving on to number 12. Back to back with yet another promising debut, it's Nina Geraci with what I would call near perfection in sweet, bubbly electronic music. That's not to say she's new to the game entirely, having dropped some mixtapes and EPs in the past, which does certainly show in her skill level that's demonstrated on this album, but as a big first splash, this is quite the statement. I Love My Computer is a snappy, satisfying, fast, and fun compilation of great ear candy for most of its runtime, and damn, it sure is great at doing that. For example, there's the sweet and nostalgic, lovable track iPod Touch with a super catchy chorus that sounds out of the current hyperpop scene a bit, over a set of big, nasty bass tones and cute poppy chopped up effects. There's also something like All I Am, which uses powerful builds and vocal sampling to such a degree it feels like audible stimulants. Type of music that really feels illegal to listen to for real. But it's not all just cute, poppy sounds though either. This album feels like a reflection on the modern generation coming of age, as well as living and existing perpetually alongside technology. The title of the album is pretty literal at times, and speaking about using said computer to create music is a great full circle moment. You also have some meaningful moments on here as well, most notably with Sing Good, which wraps into the album's theme while giving some emotion and telling a good story. Whatever you're looking for in this style of music, you'll probably find it here, and Nina Geraci is on an exciting new run. Moving on to number 11.
Feels like it was just us in the worlds that passed. When we prayed that one summer really wasn't gonna last, but we outside, rejoice, rejoice.
Jazz rap is such a banger of a genre, and the biggest rising star in it right now, without question, is McKinley Dixon. He's honestly been killing it for quite a while now, with 2023's beloved Paradise Jazz being the first I heard, and it's been so cool to see his come up in notoriety this year. And if there was ever specifically a deserved time for him to get his biggest spotlight yet, this is absolutely that time, and this is probably his best work yet. On previous works, McKinley never exactly had a minimalist approach with plenty of wild, colorful, lively tracks, but he really pulled out all the stops for this one, being constantly big, loud, and exciting. It's pretty impressive to see anyone pull together something this intricately well crafted within the jazz rap genre, and really this hasn't been done since something like T-Pab quite possibly. McKinley's rapping is also absolutely fantastic, and he has a ton of personality, a lot of technical skill, and fits into grooves most rappers probably couldn't. Outside of his collaborators here, of course, that being. Most of which you'll recognize if you're into underground, more lyrical rap, no doubt about it, all of them making a pretty cool appearance. Lyrically, a great deal was done here too. This is a concept album that essentially boils down to a group of guys trying to resurrect their dead friend, and it goes on from there. This is a great strength, and it is something that makes the album more intriguing overall, but it's both the point of some of the biggest compliments and biggest criticisms you can give the album. It's a great idea for a concept, and there are some fantastic moments of storytelling here, but unfortunately the 35-minute runtime would be very hard to pull off something like that perfectly. I do feel like certain things aren't tied up, some things don't necessarily make a lot of sense, and the whole story does have jumps in it, but the story itself is good, even if it is quick, and it feels like a lot was done very much so right with that concept as well. It's cool that it's there, and you don't necessarily have to even pay attention to something like that if you don't want to. If nothing else though, this proves that McKinley is absolutely capable of making a longer album that's still great in the future, as I wish this one really was. I hope if they end up being this conceptual, they will be longer, because that would be quite possibly a perfect album. Moving on to number 10. In conclusion to the trilogy of trilogies that is The Weeknd's career thus far, it appears that Abel Tesfaye has pulled out all the stops and decided to make a finale in the most grand and ambitious way possible. The things you've come to know and love from The Weeknd across virtually any era are present on Hurry Up Tomorrow to some extent. From spacey, slow R&B on a track like Enjoy the Show with Future, to what might as well be the Blinding Lights sequel on Cry For Me. This isn't exactly a reinvention of the Weeknd formula, but it certainly is an expansion upon it. The popular example is obviously Timeless with Playboi Carti, which leans into Carti's side of things with trap and rage, a space that we haven't really seen The Weeknd in before. But on the contrary, there's something with such immense depth and strength in writing with a song like Baptized in Fear. Moments like this in no way reach for commercial viability, rather reach for legitimate narrative. Needless to say, it's a quite varied, diverse album, and it's to a degree that I think there will be something for everyone. For that, and for how great each one of these directions sounds, it's already a pretty proper Weeknd finale, but the actual structure of the album makes that even better. Obviously, there are things such as Take Me Back to LA being its own conclusion to its own little trilogy, but also just in how this album is structured. The final run of tracks that begins with Red Terror is so peak. I can't really think of any landing that could have been stuck smoother. At 84 minutes, it's certainly a daunting listen, but I think anyone can enjoy it overall, and as a long-time fan, it's all I could have really asked for. I don't know if Abel will go on to make music under a different name in the future, but regardless, his work this decade has solidified that he will be a legend forever, regardless of how much more he does or does not create. Moving on to number 9. Here it is, everybody, the obligatory pop rap placement that's probably way too high, but it doesn't matter because I love it, okay? In melodic forms of rap and in this R&B leaning bag, I sometimes start to feel like I've heard it all. And I start to feel like everyone who comes along is probably going to sound like a carbon copy of an originator. Then, early this year comes along Eam Triplin with one of the most unique voices I've heard in this style, as well as a nostalgic but fresh sound and a straight up excellent vibe all around. I'm reminded of artists like Amine in his peak with Limbo, some of the dreamiest stuff that Mac Miller ever conjured up, or even some of the cloud rap leaning type of stuff we saw in the mid-2010s with the SoundCloud scene. But reminded of things as I am, Eam Triplin has an interesting voice and inflection, a strong amount of personality, and a certain unique charisma that's hard not to like. We got sweet, catchy hooks, fun melodies, even some storytelling, so on, all delivered from somebody fresh but skilled. The production is so slick, smooth, clean, and nice as well. I can really sink into this one. It's just as good for a close listen as it is for a background one. Basically, it's a vibe. If you're into this kind of thing, don't miss out on Eam Triplin. And next, with number 8.
Like a blanket taken from the attic, I feel numb under your
With a rise to popularity within the underground indie type of scene, it felt for quite a while that Weatherday's modern cult classic Come In would be the start and end to their story. Looking back at that legitimately great record, it's easy to see where certain influences came from, but both the poetic lyrical style and fuzzy, chaotic production made it so there is still nothing really quite like it to this day. This is until we land a whole 6 years later, that is, with the long-anticipated sophomore release follow-up from Weatherday finally filling that long existing gap. It's an album just as big and ambitious as the gap in albums would imply, including 19 whole songs and 76 minutes of runtime. But not only is it a long one, it's one that earns most of that runtime quite well, with fresh ideas and new things to see around most corners. It's still the somber, gloomy, deep-fried and blown-out Weatherday you came to know and love originally, but they've shaken up things enough. Little bits here and there to keep things fresh. But overall, what's perhaps most important is that it's a very emotional emotional album with a lot of depth, and it's already one that means a lot to a lot of people. An important one in modern rock online, no doubt, and very easily to come back to, as it's a bit of a comfortable album to lean on. Great stuff, worth the wait. Moving on to number 7. I didn't really notice until getting around to this point in both these songs and albums lists, but damn, it really was a good year for post-rock albums, all things considered. And among those great albums, one of my favorites absolutely has to be the newest one from this Polish band. Someone entirely new to me who has been doing it for a little while now. I love this title of Angry Noises, implying that it's just the sounds that the dog on the cover is making, because like that's not really an easy thing to spell out in plain letters. Very fun and creative choice there, and a quite fitting one as well, as is the cover itself with the seemingly angry dog thrashing around viciously. And that's because of just how overpowering and sinister this album is, especially in its opening moments. The ominous groove of the first several minutes makes me feel like I'm being hunted, and turning on an album that looks like this, I think that experience is exactly what you'll be looking for. It honestly helps the album's case that it's entirely instrumental for things like that as well. No lyrics or tangible voices essentially allows you to fill in the gaps yourself. In the less abstract, I'm honestly not sure I have heard a better mix of jazz and rock before. The energy and intensity is just locked the hell down from these guys. They're playing tight and absolutely killing it here. What's more impressive yet is that this is all seemingly played live despite being considered a proper album. The recording and mix sound remarkably great considering that, but I'm not sure what it all entails or how entirely live recorded this was. What I do know is that there are audience sounds at the end of each track, and honestly that's the only flaw in the album for the most part to me. It breaks my immersion a little bit in the album, and that matters a lot for this album in particular because it is one that I tend to sink into. Regardless, this is some dark, evil, sinister sounding instrumental post-rock that impressed me a whole lot. Don't let this band under your radar. And now moving on to something pretty similar with number 6. Yep, it's another post-rock album. Genuinely, sometimes I feel like this isn't even one of my favorite genres anymore. It just happened to be really good this year. They're putting out bangers on bangers. However, this one is extra interesting because while it may appear to be a debut on the surface, this is actually an entire side project of the Korean shoegaze artist Parannoul. If you're in this general space, you likely know of releases under that alias being pretty prolific and important to the somewhat recent young and online shoegaze revival. This one's more for the Swans fans than the MBV fans though, if that tells you what you need to know. And this new direction is super sick for somebody who's already proven very skilled and talented. This album nails the best things about the sound and style and its ability to be big, monumental, and oppressive. Going so far as to sample literal, big, powerful things such as trains and elephants. I feel like an overwhelming, massive punch of an album really earns those types of sounds, and even if it does sound a bit odd in concept, it works surprisingly well. This album does really play mostly to the post-rock fundamentals, but little things like that switch things up, get a little weird with it, do keep the album interesting. I feel like I may be beginning to repeat myself from the Hesse Cassell segment now, but it's so impressive how you think you've seen it all with this album, just for it to even more so grow and get more powerful and harder and crazier than ever before. But to avoid repeating myself even more, just know that I like this one a whole lot. Lots of great post-rock this year, and this has got to be the best one if you ask me. And now on to something entirely different with number 5.
If I could just pay my rent by Tuesday, I bet I'd be rich by April Fool's Day.
When looking at the posthumous legacies of popular rappers and musicians in the modern age, it's honestly disgusting to see how many have been terribly fumbled. It feels like time and time again an artist's body of work is desecrated after they're gone. 7 years, 2 albums, and both of them actually mostly finished. They might be his best overall albums too. Several of his albums hold a special place to me, but even then this might be my top favorite Mac album overall. If not, then I definitely think it's his most ambitious album. It isn't really the most most recent work from him either, rather an older album that was pieced together and refined. Where it sits in his catalog legitimately makes a lot of sense and does feel like a bit of a missing link. A lot of what you get on here really isn't Mac Miller for the radio. This album is a lot more experimental than most of what he officially put out, and it might be the most fascinating front-to-back listen. It has his smooth, lovable presence on the mic, clever lyricism, and natural, replayable pop rap ability, but there's a bit more to it with balloonerism as well. It's of course not to downplay the rest of his catalog, but if there's a Mac album I want to continue getting immersed in time and time again as of late, it'll always be balloonerism. I think this is genuinely contender for the best posthumous album ever. Rest in peace, Mac Miller, and moving on to number 4. Time flies, and it really feels like just yesterday we all saw Quadeca drop his single Sisyphus that sort of changed everything and begun the biggest redemption arc out there. It's crazy how far removed Quadeca is at this point from his original perception that most had of him. Even if it's been a while in the making, going from generally disliked to one of the greatest artists of a generation is a wild turnaround. Much like his first dive into something more conceptual, experimental, and ambitious, Quadeca's latest, Vanisher, is a legendary album that stands out pretty far apart from everything. There's not much in the world like this. From things like the rapping we come to know and love from Quad, to baroque, fanciful forms of folk, to whatever insane descriptor you'd like to throw onto Thunder, this album does so much, but the album wraps it all up nice and presents it to you in a great way. As a concept album, this is also incredibly well executed, well put together, narratively cohesive, and even strikes a chord with underlying meanings. It's very nice to see something so ambitious pulled off so properly, but to see Quadeca evolve in this direction is something else entirely. With this, he dropped what'll probably forever be an internet music classic, and that's a pretty crazy thing to witness. Beyond that, it kinda transcends description entirely. Go listen to this if you somehow haven't.
Fuck them all, let them all die.
If you told me at the beginning of this year that Whitechapel of all bands in the Big 25 would be on my top 5 albums of the year, I absolutely would have called you crazy. To be fair, I did my list differently this year, and if I combined artists from the songs list, they might not be in the top 5, but nonetheless, here we are. Deathcore is a genre of music that popped up around the mid-2000s, and as the name implies, combines death metal and hardcore punk. That moment wasn't exactly one I was around for, but I certainly was for the aftershock in deathcore, still thriving and existing for at least the following decade to some extent. I, like many others, did really dig this sound back in the day, but most have moved on to greener pastures in metal because there's only so much you can do with this style. Like any metal subgenre, the longer we see it drag on, the more generic, commercialized, and so on it tends to get, washing it out even farther than it would be with repetition. If you ask me, there was no saving deathcore. Then Whitechapel, maybe the biggest band in the scene, suddenly did something so simple, so straightforward, it wraps back around and becomes revolutionary again. They stripped it back to the basics, cut the bullshit, and played it as hard, heavy, destructively, and devilishly as humanly imaginable. 2 decades deep, and deathcore has never sounded this nasty, has never felt this raw, and has never hit with quite so much potency. In concept, this album has 2 songs to walk you through Hell's Gates, followed by 1 song to represent each of the 7 deadly sins, and then 1 closer to seal your fate. In execution, that sounds like the sickest percussion you've ever heard this side of the millennia from a mainstream metal band. Disgusting, brutal, heavy riffs and breakdowns, and vocals that sound like they were delivered from the figure depicted on the cover. Phil Bozeman, the absolute animal on the mic that he is, went so far as to deliver some of the lyrics in reverse as an homage to the idea of backwards satanic hidden messages in metal music. Again, this one was just as unexpected for me as it probably is for anybody watching this list, but they really cooked up some downright evil shit on this one, and it's exactly what I love for metal, honestly. Moving on to number 2. It's arguable that Kali Uchis has proven this before, but with every listen of Sincerely, I'm more and more convinced that she is contender for the best vocalist of the modern generation. I think with every time she's dropped throughout this decade, none of us have really been questioning her clear proficiency in just about every way when it comes to being a musician, but there's always just kind of been something missing, at least to me. It's always felt like everything is pretty optimal and her music sounds great, but maybe it just needed a little bit more of something, some glue or extra flair to bring it all home. On Sincerely, however, that issue, minor as it may be, isn't even the faintest memory, let alone one that's carrying on. Upon pressing play on this album's opener, Heaven is a Home, it's immediately clear out the gate that this one's going to take you to a whole new sweet, peaceful dimension for the next hour. The production on here is so lavish, luxurious, magical, and fantastic. It's such a great opener because it feels like walking into an elaborate entryway. The rooms, or rather songs and album that follow, absolutely carry on that same mood. Sincerely is sweet, elegant, gorgeous, and musically fulfilling in just about every way a pop album could be. Kali's vocals are genuinely perfect, and the instrumentation to back her up is so vibrant and full of passion, swelling to life more and more with each track, even down to the lyrics with pretty profound themes explored within love, self-reflection, and motherhood. The details do not go unnoticed. The whole album's runtime is above 50 minutes, even breaking past the hour mark if you count the new deluxe songs. But every time I look at that runtime, I'm shocked because it feels like it starts and ends without a single bland second and just kind of rushes right by. And that's something that's pretty hard to pull off with music in this style. For all intents and purposes, this should be derivative or samey at some point, but it really just isn't ever. It never gets to that point. I maybe could have slightly predicted this one more than Whitechapel, but honestly, not by much. Regardless, it's a welcome surprise, and I'm very glad we have what I would say is easily the Kali Uchis magnum opus. And finally, with number 1. Here it is at long last, my final pick and my only perfect score in 2025, and my favorite thing to happen to music this year in general. Revenge Seekers by Jane Remover, and another unexpected one at that too, carrying on the same way as the last two entries. Not only is Jane Remover a pretty much entirely new artist to me this year, but also because on paper this album should not really work at all. Under this particular alias, Jane Remover started gaining notoriety around 2021 with an album largely considered to be a hyperpop album, or at least somewhere inside of that movement. It was pretty well respected, but that arc didn't last long before 2023, where instead Census Designated was released and was a completely different album in every possible way, this time being a straight up rock album, mostly rooted in the shoegaze subgenre in fact. And I mean, it made some sense, artists do change direction a lot, so surely Jane would just continue on making rock music from here on out, right? Not so fast, as here comes the craziest switch of them yet, an album rooted in experimental hip-hop that sounds so digital, online, and aggressive that it makes Census Designated look like a lullaby. And somehow, that transition worked. How is an absolute miracle and a mystery, but it sure is funny that it happened. And how this might just be the greatest thing ever. Slight exaggerations and such aside, this album genuinely encapsulates the chaos of living in the internet age, only rivaled in that way from the likes of Death Grips on The Money Store. To say it's just as wild and experimental would possibly be an understatement. Not for everybody is probably a good descriptor, but if it is for you, you're probably my type of people. It's pure controlled chaos. No music should be able to do this much all at once and still sound good. From blown out bass to effects heavy vocals to insane sampling choices all at once, everything is stacked up, all crazy, but it all sounds great. I mean, for fuck's sake, Sonic.exe got sampled on here. These things just shouldn't work. Nonetheless, Revenge Seekers manages to sound great all the way through, deliver some super impactful moments, strike a large range of emotions, and even sound really catchy at most times. Saying there's nothing else like it when referring to a piece of music is pretty common. It's a common compliment, but it might be literally true in this case. Rage really only landed about 4 years back as a new genre, and digicore's establishing point is a little cloudier, but probably not a lot earlier. With those being two of the biggest genre influences, in a way there hasn't really even been enough time to smash those things together until they work like this album does. Sure, a lot of the current underground does work these things in together, but I don't think anybody sounds like Jane in particular. It's an exciting listen, it's an impressive listen, it's something totally new and fresh, and it's pretty easily my favorite album of the year. That said, it might not even be my favorite Jane Remover project anymore. Holy shit, why is she so good at music? That's for next year though, and that about wraps it up for the 2025 year-end list season. Obviously, we're about half a month deep into the new year here, so this is coming to you a bit late to say the least, and I apologize. Life's been really hectic lately, and hopefully one day that'll all be quite a bit clearer, but nonetheless, I'm really glad I got to be your last year-end list for the year. Let's leave this hellhole of a year behind us, only take the great things and keep it moving, and hope for the best. Remember to like and subscribe for more music-related content, and I'm going cocoon mode. See you later.